What if the scariest thing in the world wasn't death, but meeting who you truly are? Carl Jung warned that self-confrontation is not a path for the faint-hearted, because when you strip away every role, every belief, every illusion, something ancient begins to stir beneath the surface. The raw, unfiltered self. Most people never see it. They build entire lives on masks, identities designed to be liked, accepted, safe. But deep down, you feel it, don't you? That quiet, unsettling presence. Behind your thoughts, the part of you that doesn't fit the image you show to the world. When you stand before that truth, you realize you've never been afraid of the darkness. You've been afraid of your own reflection in it. The real you is not polished. It's not kind all the time. It's wild, chaotic, ungoverned, and yet terrifyingly honest. To meet that version of yourself is to lose the one the world recognizes. That's why so few cross that threshold. They stop at the surface of self-awareness, afraid that if they go too deep, they'll never come back the same. But maybe that's the point. Maybe transformation is meant to destroy the version of you that was never real. So, I'll ask you again. Are you ready to meet the part of yourself that's been hiding all this time? The one that doesn't want to be improved, but understood? If this question speaks to you, if you feel that quiet tremor in your chest right now, then you've already started the journey. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and tell me in the comments, have you ever met the side of yourself that scared you? There comes a moment when you stop running, and the mirror finally catches you. You stand before it, stripped of all the stories that made you feel safe, and for the first time, you don't recognize the eyes looking back. That's the moment Jung spoke of, when consciousness turns inward and meets the face of the true self, not the one shaped by society, family, or fear. The mirror doesn't show what you want to see. It shows what you've denied. It reflects the jealousy you disguised as justice, the weakness you called kindness, the anger you hid behind serenity. It doesn't lie, and it doesn't flatter. It simply returns everything you've ever sent into the world, unfiltered, merciless, whole. To face that reflection is to feel exposed in a way no one else can expose you, because there's no audience here, no one to impress, no one to blame, just you, and the version of yourself you've been avoiding. The mind trembles before this truth because it knows that once you see clearly, you can never unsee. You'll know which words are masks, which choices are fear, which dreams are distractions. But within that terror hides a strange liberation. The mirror is not your enemy, it is your witness. It shows you not what's wrong, but what's incomplete. Every flaw it reveals is a door back to wholeness, if you're brave enough to walk through it. So when you meet your own reflection and feel that chill of discomfort rise inside you, don't turn away. That feeling is the soul calling itself home. Because the true self doesn't demand perfection, it only asks for honesty. And once you learn to look without flinching, the mirror stops being a threat and becomes a guide. Before you ever met your true self, you learned to perform. You built faces to wear, one for love, one for safety, one for survival. You became what others needed you to be, and in the process, you forgot how to simply be. These are the masks we call personality, but in truth, they are only costumes stitched together by fear. Carl Jung called this facade the persona, the image we show the world to protect what lies beneath. It's not evil, it's necessary. Without it, society would collapse into raw chaos. But the danger comes when we start believing the mask is who we are, when the role becomes the reality, when we lose ourselves inside the performance. Think about it. How much of what you say is truly yours? How many of your opinions are inherited? How often do you smile when your heart is numb, or stay silent just to keep the peace? Every time you betray your truth, the mask grows thicker and the soul grows quieter. But the soul never disappears. It waits, watching from behind the roles you play. And one day, often in the middle of crisis or loss, the mask begins to crack. The relationship ends, the career collapses, the identity fails, and suddenly, the face you've worn no longer fits. That's when the panic sets in. If I'm not this person, then who am I? That question is the first breath of awakening, because the moment the mask falls, you meet the raw essence of your being, wild, unedited, real. It's frightening, yes, but it's also the only place where freedom begins. The soul doesn't want perfection. It wants authenticity, and it will keep tearing away your disguises until you remember what your face looked like before the world told you to hide. When the mask finally falls, the first thing you feel is not peace, it's panic. There's a raw nakedness in realizing how much of your life was built on illusion. You thought self-discovery would be beautiful, but it feels more like standing in front of a mirror under harsh light. Every imperfection, every contradiction, every hidden wound suddenly visible. This is the discomfort of revelation. The moment when the truth stops being poetic and becomes personal. You see the lies you told yourself to survive. You recognize how often you shaped your beliefs to be accepted, not to be real. And in that clarity, shame begins to rise. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you see how little of your life has truly been lived by you. Jung understood this perfectly. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. You can't awaken without shedding the skin that protected your sleep. But most people turn away at this point. They call it too heavy, too dark, too much. They go back to their distractions, their noise, their roles, anything to avoid the silence that follows seeing oneself clearly. Yet this pain is not punishment, it's purification. It burns away the false identities so the soul can breathe again. The discomfort you feel is not a sign of failure, it's the evidence that you've begun. If you can stay with that feeling, if you can sit in the heat without running, the revelation softens. You begin to see that what you once called darkness is simply light, arriving faster than you can adjust your eyes. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the fear becomes gratitude. Because beneath the discomfort lies a freedom you never imagined, the freedom of no longer needing to pretend. Tell me in the comments. When was the last time a truth about yourself made you uncomfortable, but changed you forever? At some point, the mask doesn't just slip, it shatters. The persona, that carefully crafted identity that once kept you safe, collapses under the weight of truth. You realize you can no longer maintain the image, no longer speak the language of pretending, and in that collapse, something sacred begins. Jung called this the death of the persona, the breaking of the illusion that you are only what the world sees. It's a psychological death, but it feels like mourning. You grieve the version of yourself that worked so hard to be perfect, to be loved, to belong. And yet there's also a quiet relief in its fall, because for the first time, there's nothing left to defend. When the persona dissolves, silence fills the space where validation used to live. It's uncomfortable, yes, because without your familiar identities, you feel invisible. Who are you when you are no longer defined by achievement, beauty, intelligence, or approval? Who are you when no one is watching? That question haunts the mind, but it also frees it. The ego screams for definition. The soul whispers for experience. The more you resist the fall, the longer you suffer. But once you surrender, once you stop rebuilding the walls that are meant to crumble, you find something that doesn't fall with them. Awareness. Awareness doesn't need to perform. It doesn't need to be seen or even understood. It simply is. And from that stillness, a new kind of strength emerges, one not based on control, but on truth. The fall of the persona is not the end of you. It's the end of pretending to be smaller than what you are. It's the moment when the soul, stripped bare, stands in its own light, trembling but real. And in that vulnerability lies a power greater than any mask could ever hold. The persona dies so that authenticity can breathe. And authenticity, once awakened, never bows again. The ego was never designed to know the whole truth. It thrives on certainty, on believing it's in control, that it understands who it is, what it wants, and where it's going. But truth doesn't serve the ego. Truth dismantles it. And that's why, when the light of awareness begins to spread through the unconscious, the ego trembles. It senses the threat immediately, because truth doesn't negotiate, and it doesn't flatter. It reveals what's real, and in doing so, it exposes the illusion of control. The ego wants to be the author of your life, but the truth reminds you that you are not the writer, you are the page. At first, this realization feels unbearable. You see how much of yourself is just reaction to pain, to expectation, to fear. You begin to notice the patterns that run you, the need to be right, the hunger for validation, the obsession with certainty. And as each illusion fades, the ego grows desperate, fighting to rebuild the crumbling story that once defined it. But here's the paradox. The more fiercely you defend the ego, the more distant you become from your essence. Because truth isn't here to destroy you. It's here to dissolve what isn't you. It strips away the noise until only the witness remains, silent, timeless, aware. The ego cannot bear that silence. It fears the emptiness where identity disappears. But if you stay, if you breathe through the terror of not knowing who you are, you'll feel something vast open behind it. A stillness that doesn't belong to the ego at all, yet has been watching through your eyes this whole time. That's the beginning of real freedom. When you stop protecting the lie and allow the truth to burn. When you realize the self you were trying to save never existed in the first place. In that space beyond the ego, there is no fear, no label, no story, only awareness, infinite, untouched, and quietly alive. There comes a moment in every inner journey when you realize the enemy was never outside. It was the part of you you refused to see. This is the confrontation with your own nature, the meeting point between what you think you are and what you've always been. And it's here that most people turn away. You begin to notice impulses that don't fit your image of a good person. You see the envy, the desire for power, the quiet pleasure in being right, the hunger for recognition. These forces frighten you because they reveal the primitive core beneath your civilized self. But Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. To confront your nature is to stand before that truth without judgment. You are not pure light. You are a balance of light and shadow, of creation and destruction. Every saint carries a sinner, every wise man a fool, and until you accept both, you remain divided, half alive, half asleep. When you finally stop denying these darker instincts, something miraculous happens. They begin to transform. Your anger becomes assertiveness. Your jealousy becomes self-awareness. Your pride becomes dignity. The same energy that once poisoned you becomes power, once it's met with consciousness instead of shame. This is why self-confrontation is terrifying. Because it's not about destroying your darkness, but about realizing it is you. And when you stop pretending to be only good, you become real. The world doesn't need more saints who hide their shadows. It needs humans brave enough to integrate them. So if you've felt that inner tension lately, that pull between who you are and who you pretend to be, it means the process has begun. Stay with it. Don't run. Tell me in the comments, when you look inside, what part of your own nature do you struggle the most to accept? After the Confrontation, everything grows quiet, not the comforting quiet of peace, but the hollow, echoing silence that follows destruction. The structures that once held you together have fallen. The beliefs that once gave you meaning have dissolved. And now you stand in the aftermath, unsure who you are without the noise that defined you. This is the silence after the collapse. It's not emptiness. It's transition. It's the space between the death of illusion and the birth of truth. But because the mind hates uncertainty, it panics. It tries to rebuild, to fill the void with explanations, with new identities, with purpose. Yet the silence demands that you stop, that you resist the urge to rebuild what was never meant to stand. Here, the ego is powerless. All the roles, all the self-definitions crumble like dust. You can't think your way out of this part of the journey. You can only feel your way through it. The silence forces you to sit with your own existence, unadorned, unprotected, and to discover that you still exist even without a story. It's terrifying, but also sacred, because beneath the absence of meaning lies a deeper presence, awareness itself. You begin to see that consciousness doesn't disappear when the identity falls apart. In fact, it's what remains. It's what watches the ruins with calm eyes and whispers. You were never the mask, you were the witness. Stay in that silence long enough, and you'll begin to hear life again, faint, distant, but pure. Not the life built on goals and personas, but the quiet pulse of being. That rhythm becomes your new foundation. The collapse was never punishment. It was mercy. It stripped away everything that kept you from meeting yourself in your rawest form and discovering that even in the emptiness, something eternal was still breathing. Every human being carries a monster inside, not the kind from stories, but the one made of instincts, rage, hunger, and shadowed desire. We spend our lives pretending it isn't. There convincing ourselves that we are civilized, spiritual kind, but the monster doesn't vanish because we ignore it. It waits, and every time we suppress it, it grows stronger in the dark. Jung understood this paradox better than anyone. The parts of ourselves we label evil are not meant to be destroyed, but understood. Because the monster is not separate from you, it is you, stripped of social disguise. It is the raw vitality that dreams of freedom but was chained by fear and shame. And, until you meet it consciously, it will rule you unconsciously. To accept the inner monster is to step beyond morality and into wholeness. It's to understand that your darkness doesn't make you less human. It's what makes you complete. The same energy that can destroy also creates. The same instinct that lashes out in anger can protect what's sacred. The same shadow that terrifies you contains the power you've spent your whole life searching for in the light. But acceptance doesn't mean indulgence. It means dialogue. It means saying, "I see you," to the forces inside that you were taught to hate. It means taking responsibility for what you are instead of pretending to be what you're not. Only then can the monster rest, not as a threat, but as an ally. When you stop dividing yourself into good and bad, saint and sinner, you return to your natural state, whole, paradoxical, alive. And in that acceptance, compassion is born, because you finally understand that everyone is fighting the same creature within. To accept your inner monster is not to fall into darkness, but to become the light that can move freely through it. And then something shifts. After the silence, after the collapse, after the long conversation with the shadow, you awaken, not as who you were, but as something vast, something clear. It isn't the birth of a new self. It's the realization that you were never lost, only asleep inside a dream of who you thought you were. This is the rebirth of consciousness. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or divine visions. It comes softly, like dawn entering a ruined house, illuminating what remains without judgment. You look around and see that everything is still broken, yet somehow perfect in its imperfection. The light doesn't erase the cracks, it reveals their beauty. The self that was built by fear dissolves, and what remains is presence, pure awareness watching itself breathe. You no longer seek validation, because nothing outside can add or subtract from what you've become. You realize the monster you feared, the ego you fought, the pain you carried. All were teachers, sculpting you into authenticity. The journey was never about escaping darkness, but about remembering that you are the one who holds both torch and shadow. Now, the chaos of the mind begins to quiet. Not because the questions are gone, but because you finally stop demanding answers. You simply allow life to unfold, knowing that consciousness is not something you find, it's what you are. That realization changes everything. It brings a serenity untouched by circumstance, a strength born not of certainty but surrender. You no longer live in fragments, you live as a whole. The old self dies, but awareness remains, infinite, compassionate, awake. And in that awareness, every moment becomes sacred. If you've walked with me through this journey, through shadow, silence, and self, you've already felt it, the quiet rebirth that begins within. Leave a comment. What part of yourself was reborn through this reflection? Like this video, if it resonated with you, your support keeps this space alive. Subscribe to the channel and watch the next video. The power hidden in the unconscious. Because awakening doesn't end here, it only changes form.